Commissioners are here, and it's 3 o'clock, and we'll start the meeting Tuesday, August 6th of the Planning Commission. I need approval of the order of agenda, please.
So moved.
Been moved?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Need a motion for the minutes of the meeting from July 2nd.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the minutes? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item C, the brown bag luncheon for August 21st has been canceled. We'll see what we've got for September. Okay, moving on to the public hearing items. Item 1A, Aaron, you're up to bat.
Yeah, thank you and good afternoon. Item 1A and 1B is titled MBA Investments Edition. This is a request for a zoning map amendment and minor subdivision. The minor subdivision includes a subdivision waiver for drain dedication, which I'll cover in a minute. This application is being represented by Kevin Bartram, who is present should you have any questions for the applicant. The subject property is located at 1717 First Avenue North and 112 and 202 16th Street North, just on the north side of First Avenue, just west of downtown here. The proposed subdivision would replat the subject property into 3 lots, and then the requested zone change would be to rezone Lot 1, which is the western lot in the subdivision, rezone that lot from GC General Commercial to LI Limited Industrial. The lots 2 and 3 would remain within the GC General Commercial Zoning District. As I mentioned, the subdivision includes a request for subdivision waiver. Currently, the Land Development Code requires any subdivision within or adjacent to a public drain, a legal drain, to the land within 175 feet from the center line of that drain to be dedicated to the public for drain and flood protection purposes. The drain in this case has been there a long time. It's located underground in culverts, and the applicant has requested, in lieu of dedicating 175 feet of land, that a 35-foot drain easement would be established from the center line of the drain. And so the drain right now is located on the western edge of the plat. The western boundary of the plat is essentially that center line. And so the subdivision plat would include a 35-foot wide drain easement that would be established. The applicant has worked with the engineering department, Fargo Engineering Department, as well as Southeast Gas Water Resource District on the details of this proposed waiver, and they are currently in the process of working on some of the details. But in concept, as far as the dedication of 35 feet, everybody's comfortable with that dedication of easement in lieu of the 175. And so the details of the agreement and how the land can be used is currently being worked out. That will take the form of either a license agreement or a separate easement document independent of the plat. The primary purpose of this application is to facilitate the transfer of ownership of the proposed Lot 1 to the adjacent property to the west, which is Ferguson Waterworks. I can let the applicant speak to that a little more, but it's part of a land transfer essentially. But overall, staff finds that the request meets the applicable review criteria of the Land Development Code as outlined within the staff report. Staff is recommending approval of the proposed zone change, minor subdivision, as well as subdivision waiver as detailed. And I think with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have for staff.
Any questions, commissioners, for Aaron? I think, Aaron, is it worked out? I take it, and Kevin will probably answer this question, that there will probably be a passageway across that ditch to access this storage yard?
Yeah, and that is one of the details that is currently being worked out. I will ask if City Engineer Brenda Derrick has any comments. She could probably answer the details of that agreement more than I could. But essentially, yes, that is one of the things that the city needs is access to maintain the underground culverts and make any repairs that may be necessary in the future.
Okay, with no questions for Aaron, I'd like to invite the applicant to speak. Kevin, would you like to address for any reason? Questions for him? Okay. Anybody from the public that would wish to comment on this? Anybody from the public? All right, I'll close the public comment. Any additional discussion, or are we ready to act? Motion? Commissioner Gelke?
Mr. Chairman, I'll offer the motion as included in the staff report.
Is there a second? Commissioner Morgan? Thank you. Any further discussion? Roll call vote?
Sherling,
Yes.
Morgan,
Aye.
Bachmeyer,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Schneider,
Aye.
McGelkey,
Aye.
Fisher. Aye. Kunkelman.
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to item 2, a hearing on an application requesting a conditional use permit to allow for an alternative access plan in a limited commercial zoning district. Megan, please.
Good afternoon, Chair and Commissioners. Item 2 before you is an application for a conditional use permit for an alternative access plan for parking in the Woodhaven Plaza and Prairie Tech additions. The property is located at 4110, 4137, and 4175 40th Street South, and 4055 and 4100 41st Avenue South, which includes a portion of lots 3 and 4 and all of lots 5 and 6 of Block 1 Woodhaven Plaza Edition, and a portion of Lot 2 Block 1 Prairie Tech Edition. You'll see up here, originally the application included the property located at 4014 41st Street South, but was withdrawn from the applicant. And additionally, would like to note that this is the portion of Lot 2, Block 1, Prairie Tech Edition, which will align with the proposed Lot 2 of Prairie Tech Second Edition, which you'll see as item 3 next on your agenda. Aldevron, a research medical office use, has an existing structure located on this property here, as you can see in the aerial imagery, and has plans for future expansion of a campus setting. The Planning Commission approved a conditional use permit on 4055 41st Avenue South, which is just right here, this lot, on November 1st of 2016, which did replace the original CUP that was approved earlier that year in June. Both of the conditional use permits were for an alternative access plan for parking, and should be noted that if approved, the CUP will replace the current CUP, which is recorded document number 1495757. Here's some images that just show kind of the existing condition. This property on the picture on the north is at the south side of the property looking north. Here on the left side shows, I'm gonna just switch back for a second here, shows the perspective from this point looking west. You see the south side of the existing building. And then over here is on the west side of the property looking east. So between the top image and the right image kind of shows you the expanse of the property included in the application. Aldevron has plans for a future expansion of a campus and has applied for a CUP to address parking related to the expansion. This image here up on the screen shows the conceptual plans for complete build out of the campus and is just shown for illustrative purposes and could change, but at this point is kind of their anticipated campus build out. The applicant has proposed changes to conditions of the existing CUP, which include removing requirement for some open space to accommodate future parking for an office use and to exclude primary mechanical space in the parking ratio. The applicant contends that there is an unusually large amount of mechanical space for the facility operations due to lab environments, and that excluding the mechanical space from the parking ratio aligns with the anticipated parking needs of the facility. And the applicant also states that the parking ratio aligns with the anticipated employee and staffing levels, including adequate space for that shift change. And I should have noted applicant Brian Berg is here. Should you have any questions? Staff has received one call of inquiry on the application with no noted concern, and staff finds that all criteria are met and is recommending approval with the following conditions. One off-street parking space shall be provided per 570 square feet of medical research office use, excluding primary mechanical spaces. The parking requirements may be met anywhere within the properties included in the conditional use permit, and that the conditional use permit will cease if the medical research office use ceases. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any question, commissioners, for Megan? Making this easy today. Yeah. Okay, any questions for the applicant? If the applicant would like to speak. Can't let Brian off too easy today. Any questions for, if anybody's got any for? See no questions. I'll open it up to the public for comment. Any questions from the public on this project? Okay, I'll close the public comment. Any additional discussion, commissioners, or are we ready to act?
I'll make the motion as outlined in our packet.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call vote.
McGilkey,
Aye.
Schneider,
Aye.
Sherling,
Yes.
Holtz,
Aye.
Morgan,
Aye.
Lockmeyer,
Aye.
Fisher,
Aye.
Kunkelman.
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to item number 3, a hearing on the application requesting a plot of Prairie Tech Second Edition. Donald, please.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Donald Kress from the Planning Department. Item 3 here is similar in location to the item you just heard, which was right across the street here. Ms. Alshog referred to this property being replatted. These are 2 separate entitlements, but they just happen to be one right after the other on the agenda. Again, I'll note that the staff report and case was prepared by our staff member Luke Moorman, who cannot be here today, so I'm presenting on Luke's behalf here. Again, it's area zoned limited commercial here. There's a large vacant area on this property. This is the Smile Acres dental office here, and then this large undeveloped area of the property. And so, again, here 40th Avenue South, here's Aldeveron across the street. This is Dakota Carrier Network, DCR, as you were asking about, sir. And you were standing looking across 40th there, standing on the edge of the Aldeveron property. As you see, it's just an open field back here. And the plat proposes to divide this into 2 lots. The existing lot here will cover the dental office, and even after this is subdivided, the dental office will comply with the landscaping and parking requirements of the LDC. And then this is the undeveloped lot, which Aldeveron apparently is going to develop as part of their project in the future. You know, utilities have been provided for, evaluated by our engineering department, and provided for with the necessary easements. The applicant, Tony Paul, is with us this afternoon and may wish to address the commission. I handed out right before the commission meeting started a slightly updated plat, not too different than the one that was in your packet, but that's also the plat that appears here on the screen, just some small comments that we had to have the engineer fix. And the applicant has provided a Mylar for that. So that concludes staff's presentation. Thank you, Commissioners. The recommendation is stated on the staff report and shown on the screen.
Any questions for staff? This is an easy group. Invite the applicant to speak if needs be. Questions? See no questions. We'll open it up to the public for comment. Any comments from the public on this item? Close the public comment period. Any additional discussion, or are we ready to act, Commissioner?
I move to approve as recommended by staff.
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Schneider,
Aye.
Lockmeyer,
Aye.
Sherling,
Yes.
Fisher,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
McGilkey,
Aye.
Morgan,
Aye.
Kunkelman.
Aye. Motion carries. Item number 4 has been continued to September 3rd. don't know if there's anybody in the audience that was going to speak to that, but we'll move on to item number 5. Hearing on an application requesting a zoning change from MR3 multi-dwelling residential to LC limited commercial. Maggie, good to see you here today.
Hi, good afternoon. As you noted, items 5A and 5B are located on Lot 1, Block 12, the Pines of the District Edition, which has the address of 3800 56th Avenue South. You'll notice that the surrounding land around the property, these are apartments, but then it's predominantly vacant. The applicant is requesting 2 different entitlements, the first being a growth plan amendment. The growth plan amendment is to transition from the low to medium density residential to commercial. The subject property is located within the South Fargo Tier 1 West, as stated in the 2007 growth plan. This plan designates the property as low to medium density residential, and the applicant is proposing to change that designation to commercial, as depicted in the map. We did hold an open house to allow neighbors around the project site to come in and meet with the applicants. This meeting was held last Wednesday on July 31st. During the meeting, one neighbor did come in and just discuss the future land use with the applicants. And those applicants, who are Hospice of the Red River Valley, along with Dan Bodie, are here today too to speak to that. The second entitlement that's being requested today is a zone change from the MR3 multi-dwelling residential to the LC limited commercial. The proposed use for the subject property is an out-of-home hospice facility. Staff believes that the limited commercial zone is the right fit for that community service use. Staff finds that all criteria have been met, and we are recommending approval. This is a graphic that's a preliminary sketch of how the site would be used if the 2 entitlements are granted. Like I said, the applicants are here and have some additional information for you. But other than that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Commissioners, any questions for Maggie on this? Mike?
Yeah, I've got a question in regards to the, what's going to be required as far as a landscape buffer between, on the west side of that property that butts up against those single-family lots?
So landscape buffers are determined by the the residential protection standards are determined by the zoning district. So since this is a single-family zone, it will be required to be buffered, which usually has an amount of trees and amount of shrubs per foot that go along with it.
No fence?
Typically no fence, it would be vegetation.
Other questions? We'd like to invite the applicant to speak if they would like to. Any questions for the applicant?
Good afternoon, Chairman Gunkelman and other Planning Commission members. My name is Dan Bodie. I'm an attorney with the Bodie Law Firm here in Fargo. I represent the applicant. I'm beeping, or somebody's beeping. Also with me today are Tracy Capron and Stephen Astrup from Hospice of the Red River Valley. We are very excited about this impactful and needed project in the city. And if you will bear with us, we'd like to play a real short video for some, what we think is some important background for the project.
I know I'm young, you guys, but I'm not very tech savvy.
Don't ask me.
Home is where the heart is. And that's why it's our calling to fulfill the need to build the first hospice house in North Dakota. We invite you to be part of this gift to our community. The lives it will touch and the memories it creates will be immeasurable. The time is now.
My name is Roger Greenley. I've had 2 experiences with hospice of the Red River Valley. My mother suffered from dementia and passed away, and a month later to the day, my daughter died from cancer. It would have been wonderful to have a hospice house when my mother was in need of that, and my daughter, who were both in the environment of a hospital where they couldn't recover from their diseases. In the final week or 2 weeks, I didn't leave my daughter's side. Her husband was there. We stayed there. We slept there in the hospital room. A hospice house would be a better environment to make those special times with family. Hospice is there to take care of the medical needs, and we want to be a family.
My name is Brenda Geary, and my dad, Terry Brunette, received care under Hospice of the Red River Valley. Our journey started at the middle part of 2016, where he was diagnosed with a brain tumor. And for 18 months, he fought the fight. 5 brain surgeries, 3 of which were here local in Fargo, 2 of which were down at the U of M in the cities. As beautiful as hospitals can be, their main goal is to sustain life and to try to keep one going. But in the last weeks, I knew my dad wanted to pass, and I knew that he was dying. And at that point, my only thought and the only goal I had in mind was how I could do that with providing the dignity and the compassion and the grace that was my dad, and to preserve who he was. And through hospice's care, we were able to do that. We just simply wanted to bring him to more of a tranquil, peaceful place. And ultimately, he had always shared with me during those 18 months, if home was an option and if we could bring him there, he would love that. There are so many successful hospice houses around the country. This should be the exemplary model of care provided for end of life.
I think there's a need, a great need in this community right now to have some beds that can take care of it. I'm Irv Iniger, and I've been an avid supporter of hospice of the Red River Valley. I had 3 parents die within a year, all on hospice, but one went into one of these care units. My father-in-law went in because he was in a nursing home. His wife had Alzheimer's. He couldn't care for her anymore, but he also then couldn't care for himself. And hospice was there to put him in a bed where we knew family members could be around him to see the care and see the love that he had as he finished his last few days.
My name is Kirsten Hopkins, and I'm a registered nurse with Hospice of the Red River Valley. I can think of many of my own patients who could have used a hospice house for reasons such as the home environment wasn't accommodating to their needs at end of life, or they didn't have a caregiver, or they had symptoms that needed the expert care to get them under control, and even when a caregiver needed respite.
A hospice house would provide an environment that is designed around family and friends.
We envision our hospice house as having an environment where patients feel it's their home away from home, where everyone can feel welcome and supported, and where children can feel comfortable.
I think of spacious, wide open floor plans, large bedroom facilities that have couches that pull out for family members to be able to sleep right there in the same room. Bright colors that bring peace but bring happiness to a situation.
It's quiet and peaceful, comfortable, it's a home.
It is going to be a home for them. And not only for them, but their families as well, the people that come and see them. For years, Hospice of the Red River Valley has dreamed about having a hospice house in our community. I think it's time that we stepped up at North Dakota and we build our own facility, just like everybody else has done.
We all at some point are going to lose a loved one, whether it be a parent, a child, a spouse. We need a hospice house to be able to be an option for families to be able to pass with the dignity that they deserve. And through your giving and your support, we can make this happen.
Prior to getting to this stage, hospice probably looked at close to a dozen sites in the FM area, and really selective for a project like this. It needs to have enough space to accommodate the type of amenities that the patients and their families will benefit from. It's also super important that it be accessible, that it be able to be located, because while hospice of the Red River Valley will continue to provide in-facility and in-home services, this will be, the inpatient services here will be used not only by people in the FM area, but people from out of town. So the ability to quickly find this place, the ability to have amenities nearby, super important for site selection as well. So this, after kind of going through several machinations of site selection, this site was identified as being the best site available in our market right now, and we think it's a very good fit for our project, and we think it's a very good fit for the neighborhood. And I'm available for any questions.
Any questions for the applicant?
I'd just like to make a comment. It sounds like a really good project. I'm interested in knowing a little bit more about it. How long do people stay at these facilities? Or do they become in a certain stage in the process, or how is that determined? And I know you're working with the legal aspects and the plan itself, but is there someone else there with you?
I'll turn you over to Tracy, who's much more qualified on those questions.
Thank you.
Hi. A hospice house can be used. Medicare requires that we offer 4 levels of care for our patients. One of the ones that we've been sadly lacking throughout our state is what they call general inpatient, meaning a patient's symptoms are out of control, they're in trouble. They can come in here. Medicare says, I'm going to say Medicare, because they take and calculate, and they say an average length of stay for a general inpatient is 5 days. About 50% of patients that come into our hospice house will pass there, but the other 50% will go home, because our goal is to get them where they want to be and need to be. We are very limited in the number of nursing home beds that we can provide. So as a caregiver, when you're in there, you're exhausted. A lot of times, patients need a break from their families too, and Medicare pays for a 5-day, 5-night stay. Both of these covered at no financial cost to the patient or family. Now, there is an opportunity at times, if someone wishes to stay longer, that they will be able to do what they call residential, for short-term incremental evaluated times for residential care. But it is not a long-term care facility. There'll be a lot of people in and out of there, and a lot of people served, because those are some gaps that we currently have that we need to fill. Did I answer your question for you?
Yes, very well. And say that someone decides they'd like to return for a few days, is that also covered by Medicare?
Absolutely. These respite stays, the thing of it is you can't do them back to back. You have to have breaks. They evaluate that. But we go basically on what's the need and what's the problem. Everybody's different, and everybody's needs are different. So these 5-day, 5-night stays, I've done a hospice house before, and I've had people that scheduled them, because they knew when they're on a journey. Typically, a patient is 6 months or less under Medicare, but we've had people on several years that continue to decline and meet the criteria. Well, after 3 years of caregiving, you need a break sometimes, or things happen, or a wedding, or travel. They can come in and use our facility and know that their families are safe with a lot of staff to take care of the needs of the patient.
Thank you. And how many patients can you have will you have at your facility?
Well, it's an 18-bed facility. You'll see 3 wings. 2 of the wings, each wing, as I call them, so that the patients and families have access to the outdoors. It's the view from the bed, right? That's why the environment and the foliage and the flower gardens all need to be there. For the 6 beds on each of the 2 wings, so that equals 12. And then we will also have 6 of those beds that we're going to have set up to serve our Alzheimer's population in the community. We're the 2nd highest state for death from dementia in the country. And we need to have a place that we can bring to help people get the behaviors under control that are on hospice and get them back home or where they call home, whether it be a facility or their private residence. So it doesn't seem like enough sometimes, but they don't stay there real long. You know, they get things fixed and they want to go home.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for asking. Any other questions?
Any other questions, commissioners?
John, it seems like a lot of parking. I just was curious, staffing, is it quite a bit for staffing or is it for families? Or
It's for both. And one of the things you can't underestimate, I found, is parking. In particular, with the design of the building, it's important for the patient family to have short walks. You've got a lot of elderly people coming in to visit. So that frontline staff, obviously, behind our current location, we will not be in. We will actually move our administration office into here so that we can help serve those patients. Got a lot of staff, including myself, on duty that can go back and help. So that's why they'll be moving. And we also do a lot of community education and bereavement. So a lot of bereavement clients come to see us currently, and they'll need space from in the community that are non-hospice bereavement clients.
Any other questions? I'll open it up to the public for comment. Any comment from the public? Any questions from the public? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any additional discussion, commissioners, or are we ready to act? I'll entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the findings and recommendation of staff.
It's been moved. Is there a seconded? It's been seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Bachmeyer?
Aye.
Sherling?
Yes.
Magelke?
Aye.
Morgan?
Aye.
Fisher?
Aye.
Schneider?
Aye.
Holtz?
Aye.
Gunkelman?
Aye. Motion carries. Moving on to item number 6, a hearing on an application requesting a right-of-way vacation of a portion of 5th Street North between blocks 21 and 22. Donald.
Good afternoon again, Commissioners. From far south Fargo, we'll move to downtown here. This area, the purple, indicates DMU zoning. This is Broadway and 4th Avenue North. Some of you may recall this as the old Goodyear site. Those of you who remember that business being in operation. We'll look at the aerial photograph here. Again, this is former Great Northern Depot, now Great Northern Cycles, True Green. 5th Street cuts through here. The applicant owns this area here and wants to vacate 21 and a half feet of this public right-of-way here to make room for a larger project proposed that is known as the Mercantile, still in the development phase, similar to the Roberts Commons parking ramp with retail and housing around it. You are not voting on that today. We're just looking at the street vacation today. So you'll see here, you're probably familiar to you here, just looking down the street both ways here. We're standing at Great Northern Cycle looking south, and then the other way, standing here on 4th Avenue looking north. So this area is the area proposed to be vacated, and there will be, as I understand it, a parking garage entrance on this side. Similarly, as you see this property, there's also an alley down the middle of this, which will eventually have to be vacated. We believe your commission will be looking at that next month, that is in the September meeting, because they need to have that entire area for their project and to create this as one large project. So as you know, street vacations are not in the LDC that we do it on findings based on the North Dakota Century Code as cited in your packets, and this does then go to City Commission. There's an extra long notification period that, that we've accounted for in this. So, again, the plat is in your packet there. Staff's recommendation is stated in the staff report and shown on the screen. The applicant's representative, Mr. Keith Lear of Kilbourne Group, is with us this afternoon. He might have some comments or provide some additional details on the Mercantile project for you. That concludes staff's presentation. Thank you, Commissioners.
Any questions for Donald, Rocky?
Thanks, Donald. I just had a question. Is the parking on there? It looks like it takes up the parking on that side of the road. Is that?
Yeah, that's about the right amount, sir. That about where that parking area is, the depth of those parking. It will be replaced with a parking facility. So there will obviously be some time where that parking will be gone, but eventually it will be replaced by the parking ramp itself.
There won't be on-street parking there anymore?
No, sir, that'll be just a narrower right-of-way still maintained as a street.
Question for Donald.
Yes, ma'am.
If you're coming in from Broadway and you're on north there by the Great Northern Bicycle Shop, so the road kind of trickles out as you get past that area where the right-of-way is anticipated?
Right in here, ma'am?
I'm just asking, the traffic that's coming in from Broadway, the road there seems to trickle out once it gets over toward 4th Street.
Yeah.
Is there going to be any redevelopment of that so that there's actually a way to get through there rather than it blocked?
That is actually, this is actually a private drive. Right? That's a private drive there. So that is not a public street. We all drive on it, but that's not actually a public street. The public street ends here. So we're not aware of any plans to redevelop these properties here. And this is used mainly by the people who are coming into here and accessing these businesses. And it will remain as a public street for some time in the future, but just a somewhat narrower right-of-way than we normally have. It'll be 50 feet wide.
Which building is the train depot?
Well, this is, I see.
Not the bicycle shop,
Yeah.
the actual train depot.
That's on this end here, right?
I don't think so.
It's the next building over.
Next building. It's the next building, yeah, okay. Yes.
Okay, so there will be adequate access to that building?
Oh, I see
then?
where you're going with it. Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. Yeah, so you'll be able to still come in here. You'll still be able to come in here and get in there. Yes, I see what you're saying. The current train depot is this one. The old one is that one.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any, consideration, thinking if you access the train depot off 4th Street and the bicycle shop off Broadway, is there consideration to sort of save on the maintenance long-term and vacate the whole street? I mean, where's that street going otherwise?
You mean vacate the rest of 5th Street?
Yeah.
The rest of this. That's a possibility, but I believe, sir, that we talked about that internally. We don't have any planned time to vacate that at this point.
We, Jim Gilmore did reach out to all of the abutting properties, and right now, to the east, there just isn't that desire. My feeling is upon redevelopment here, at some point, you're gonna see redevelopment to the east. And at that point, we would look to try and get that vacated so that it's an access easement only, because you're correct, it's a dead-end road.
Donald, you did say that the parking ramp will have an entrance on that east side of the lot there?
Yes, sir. I don't have a graphic of that, but I believe
their intent is to do that?
Take an access off there too. Again, Mr. Lear might be able to provide some detail on that.
I have a question. So there's apartment buildings to the south of 4th Avenue, and the tenants frequently use the parking available on 5th Street. How is this project going to impact their ability to park?
Well, at some point in construction, and I don't know, maybe Mr. Lear can provide us with a construction timeline as to when this will actually, we're just vacating it now, when that will actually go away. That parking will not be available though once that project starts, ma'am. And again, we get to the applicant. Maybe they can tell us some more about the timing of that. But until there will be a time in there when, I don't know if they'll be able to take advantage of the parking ramp as a parking facility as well. but that will eliminate that on-street parking there, the diagonal parking at that location.
Let the applicant speak.
Sure. Yeah. Good afternoon. As Donald said, I'm Keith Lear, the Vice President with Kilbourne Group, and then the Senior Project Manager in charge of this project. So as he was explaining, the intent is that the current right-of-way line essentially replaces the back of parking location or the back of diagonal parking location that is currently on the street. The ramp will have two entrances into it. It will have a kind of at-grade parking level that's more of a quick in and out, and then also a, call it more of your long-term parking or leasing parking entrance to it. Because of those two entrances into the ramp, we were already taking up a portion of the on-street parking. And then because the ramp is there and we will have the ability for 90-minute parking or free, portion of the first couple hours free, similar to other city run ramps, that parking can be shifted into the ramp and handled that way. From a duration during construction, we are continuing to work with the city and get through all of our development agreements, getting through some of the land and entitlement things associated with this. But we are on a path right now for an October ground break on this project with a target of a 10-month construction period. So hoping to be open in late summer or early fall of 2020.
I don't know if you got your question answered. Your concern is the apartment building that is on the north side of the Goodyear building? That
Well,
those tenants
this one down here,
on the
Matt.
park?
Yeah, I believe there's an architecture firm on the main floor of that unit, or of that building, and yeah, residential apartments.
The timing of this ramp is such that our Block 9 project ramp is opening actually very shortly. It's kind of a soft opening right now, but as that ramp opens, there is about a year time period before the overall project really starts to move into that ramp. So that kind of year buffer helps alleviate some of the congestion from this other project with the goal that when the Block 9 building opens, this ramp is also open about the same time. And then we're able to kind of help by shuffling some people around associated with those two spots.
And so have any efforts been made to notify the neighbor? Because I believe there's condos facing Broadway near there too. They might have their own private parking, but.
Ma'am, beyond our notification of this vacation, there was not a specific notification about the parking situation that the planning department put out.
Okay.
And then the current surface level parking lot is under our control and management, and we've been working with those tenants to find their replacement parking during the time too.
Okay. I guess the reason why I'm questioning this is my main concern is that, to my understanding, that parking right now is free to the public. So residents in that area who live in that area might use it for.
The on-street parking is the same as the rest of the on-street parking, yes, in
right.
downtown. Yep.
Yeah, and so a parking ramp would essentially change that. It would take some of that free parking space away, and then residents might be required to lease parking space.
They would have the opportunity to do that. Then, much like the Roberts Commons ramp, the nights and weekends are targeted to be free of charge for general use parking.
Any other questions for the applicant? I'll open it to the public for comment.
Could I ask Donald one more question?
Yes.
Okay, can we go back to the previous? Yeah, okay. This kind of relates to the question I asked previously about access from Broadway into the road that runs across the south side of the bicycle shop and then over.
This one here, ma'am.
Yes,
Yes,
and then over toward the train depot. So the train depot, the land along the railroad tracks there, is that all owned by the bike shop? Or does the train depot own, or the railroad own part of that?
I don't have my reference to do this, but I'm imagining that there's a fence right here, a wrought iron fence, and I would imagine the railroad owns everything on their side of the fence, and that Great Northern Cycle owns this area here, And where that exact demarcation with the Amtrak over here is, I don't know. I don't have that map handy, ma'am.
Okay, yeah, sometimes there can be businesses along the railroad tracks that the railroad still owns the land, and
right. Yes,
I
ma'am.
would assume that in what you're describing is that the bicycle shop has purchased the property on which it stands, and the railroad would still own the land underneath the railroad depot.
That may be the case. Again, I don't have my
Okay.
my map here handy. I didn't anticipate that question.
Well, what I'm kind of getting to is there is such a dearth of focus on railroad traffic in and out of Fargo. And, people used to use the railroads a lot for travel, and it's kind of returning in terms of popularity. But we have an abysmal situation in terms of the depot itself. And then I'm thinking that because of the access from 4th Street going over there, it looks like there's very little in and out capacity for travel. And in fact, you were saying that it's privately owned. So I'm just kind of concerned about the not so much this part here to the east of the proposed ramp, but what's going to happen to that little space over there?
Like up here?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, again, ma'am, I don't know that ownership offhand. What's proposed to be vacated here does not affect the railroad land. That's a dedicated public street.
Right, but it does affect it in some ways.
Yeah, well, yes, but it doesn't affect that. It's not part of that railroad-owned land.
And that would also affect parking for the depot.
I would, or at least add to, we are targeting to bring 380 parking spots within 200 yards of the train depot as well with this project. I realize there's a short-term on-street impact because of this. I believe that parking is signed 90-minute during normal business hours, much like the rest of that style of street in downtown. So we do impact that during the short term, but the 10 months down the road gain is an additional 380 spots in a parking ramp at that location.
Thank you.
Rocky?
Donald, my understanding is we contacted the Amtrak station and the railroad with the contact thing, and we didn't hear back from either of them.
Yeah, we didn't. Property owners within 300 feet of the vacation area would be notified, sir, so I believe that would cover them.
Okay. So no concerns, thanks.
And if I may, just to kind of a quick reminder on the vacation, I would just reference the staff report on the criteria as it applies to a vacation. And, the Amtrak is on its own standalone lot. The Great Plains Bike store is on its own lot. And, the vacation of the road or the narrowing of the road is on its own lot. In terms of, I don't believe Commissioner Holtz's question was answered. And in relationship to apartment parking downtown, we really don't have a city mandate or a assistance program, if you will, for residential parking downtown. And so you're correct, in terms of on-street parking that is free, that might diminish slightly based on the proposed parking ramp. But I think the understanding of the proposed parking ramp is that it's part of an overall downtown parking strategy. And and I'm not sure if your concern is related to potential costs that a resident might have to incur downtown, but I would imagine it might. So.
Any further questions for the applicant or Donald?
Commissioner Gonkelman, just to go back, just taking a quick look while our director was talking there, but didn't distract you. I hope I did not distract you. That this is the Great Northern Cycle is privately owned, and this is owned by, the depot is obviously owned by Amtrak as well. So as you say, that is a privately owned piece, ma'am.
Okay, we'll open it up to the public for any comment on this. Any comment from the public on this? Seeing no comment from the public, we'll close the public comment. Any additional discussion, commissioners? Are we ready for a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'll offer the motion as included in the staff report.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Holtz?
Aye.
McGelkey?
Aye.
Fisher?
Aye.
Schirling?
Yes.
Morgan?
Aye.
Schneider?
Aye.
Bachmeyer?
Aye.
Gunkelman?
Aye. Motion carries.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Moving on to item 7, hearing on an application requesting a conditional use permit to allow a bed and breakfast in an SR3 single dwelling residential zone. Kylie.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Item number 7 is titled Chazé Roberts Edition. The applicant, Roger Nelson, is requesting a conditional use permit for a bed and breakfast located at 611 8th Street South. The property is zoned SR3 single dwelling residential. The applicant will continue to live on the residence and will convert 5 bedrooms for the bed and breakfast. There will be 5 dedicated parking stalls on site as shown on the site plan on your screen. The applicant is also requesting that receptions, private parties, or similar activities be permitted as part of this conditional use permit. He does not anticipate any large functions that would disrupt the neighborhood. Staff has received 1 letter of opposition for this application. The letter was not included in your packet, but is a laydown item and was sent to you via email earlier today. Based on the conditional use permit criteria of the LDC, staff is recommending approval with the conditions shown on your screen. Mr. Nelson could not attend the meeting today, but Christine Klubeck is here to represent him. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Any questions for Kylie? Just one, does this, being this is in a historic overlay, right?
Yes.
That has no effect on this, and I know maybe we'll have the applicant.
No, that'll have no effect on this application. The historic overlay district only dictates if something were to exchange on the exterior of the building.
Okay. John, you look like you're going to ask a question.
Oh, I was going to, is Christine going to step forward?
Well, if there's no further questions, we'll have the applicant speak if they'd like to.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to represent my friends Roger and Margaret Nelson in this pursuit. I hope you will give it careful consideration and vote approval. Thank you.
Questions for the applicant, anybody?
I'd just like to make a comment. Thank you, Christine, for doing this. I know the Nelsons have been attempting to sell their house for 13 years, I think it is, and they... I think 15. 15? Yeah, and they have another house that they've remodeled and is for sale, and they're living in a condo now, and they've been trying extremely hard to find a way to make sure that the house is well cared for because of the amount of money and time they've put into it. So it can't really be sold for a whole lot less than it's been offered, because if the price dropped, the person buying it wouldn't be able to afford the upkeep. So I think it's a really wonderful thing that the neighborhood is supporting the Nelsons in this effort.
I think there are many of our neighbors here today in support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll open this up to the public for comment. Anybody from the public like to speak on this?
Hi, my name is James Baum. I live at 511 South A Street, and I've lived there for the last 36 years. When Roger and Margaret moved into this area, they knew what the zoning was. And as far as I'm concerned, I think that you should deny this conditional use permit. Parking is a problem right now. Even in front of Rogers in the wintertime, he puts out a temporary sign that he owns saying no parking, because there's 2 apartment buildings to the east. They don't have enough parking. And then in the wintertime, when that comes, where everybody can only park on one side, so that string of parking is quite long. I would say that would probably go half the block down and all the way to the north. Also, there's going to be a condo project, I believe. There's a sign out front on 5th Avenue and A Street. So there you're going again. I know these people are supposed to have parking for their units, but you know the visitors and everything are going to be parking out on front, so there's going to be additional parking there. I look at this project as a motel, temporary lodging where people are going to be going in and out during the weekday, during the weekends. We don't know who these people are. The people that live in the apartments across from us usually have a 1-year lease. These leases will be probably for maybe a week, maybe 2 or 3 days, whatever the event is in Fargo. They may be staying for a couple days. So I think there's a security risk. Also in the past, we've gone through different objections to these kind of businesses being put in our historical area. One is signage. I believe that there is a law right now that you can't have anything more than a, 8 by 10 inch sign. Let's see, there was one other thing I was going to say here. Oh, the only other thing that I may mention is that we had a neighborhood meeting. I was not there, I was out of town at the time, but my son attended at Roger and Margaret's house, and Don Morgan was there promoting a event center for their house. I think to a certain extent, that's what they're trying to get at here now. And I just think that there's a security risk, parking. It's never been zoned this way. I think it should be denied.
Any questions?
Thank you for your concerns.
Anybody else from the public?
My name is Rusty Popacek. I'm speaking today on behalf of Scott Neal, who wasn't able to be here. He lives just south of this property. He lives at 623 8th Street. He was the person that submitted the letter. I don't know if you guys have a chance to read the letter. I don't plan on going through all the bullet points today, but I'll just reiterate the same thing. Same concerns as far as extra traffic in that area, and also that this is a residential area that is pretty much being turned into a business use. So that's all I have, unless you have any other questions for me.
Here.
I do have a question for you, and I'm sorry if it's an unfair question because I know you're just here on behalf of Scott Neal, but we got this letter, and it's interesting because Scott Neal sent the letter with the Artie Offit letterhead on top. And I went to Hawthorne School. Artie Offit is, RDO has a headquarters there adjacent to that school, and it's probably less than a block away as a crow flies. And
yeah, it is just right next door.
Pretty interesting. His bullet points are that, this is a residential neighborhood. Business will bring in extra traffic and parking. I think RDO's been a pretty good neighbor for the Hawthorne neighborhood, and that's closer than he lets on here. He says there's not another commercial business for like 13 blocks. If you go north-south, sure, but if you go 1 block to the east, he has his headquarters there. I don't know. It seems a little disingenuous that his bullet points and happens to use the letterhead. I think it's shown that there is a good partnership that can happen when these things are done right. So I just maybe pass that back on to Scott.
Yeah, and I can't speak for him. When he's saying 18th Avenue, I'm assuming he's probably just saying up and down 8th Street, but I don't know that.
I'd just like to comment that the house itself is 3 houses in from 5th Avenue. It's not a quiet district. There's a lot of traffic on 5th Avenue going east-west constantly. I live on 5th Avenue, and it's a busy avenue. So when you start going down 8th Street, traveling south, it's coming from a busy avenue, and it gets more quiet as you go further south into the neighborhood. But this building is on the edge of the neighborhood, And so it is impacted by more traffic than any place else until you get down to 13th Avenue. So I just wanted to make the comment that the amount of traffic on that street is minimal because most of the time it's people who are just going into the neighborhood because it's not a real thoroughfare. There is parking on the street. So somebody coming in through 3 houses from 5th Avenue I don't think is going to cause much of an impact. And then another thing is that if you looked at the layout, there is adequate parking for the bed and breakfast on site. So the parking shouldn't be a problem.
Any other comments? Any other public comments? Sure.
On the north side of 5th Avenue and 8th Street, there's a parking problem right now. I don't know if, Don, are you referring to the bed and breakfast that is on the northwest corner of 5th and 8th Street?
There was one. I don't think there is one there now.
There's not one now. It's
No.
a single family.
Right.
Single family.
Yeah,
Next one over, single family. So, you know, we're trying to hold our own here. We're trying to keep our school, Hawthorne. My kids went to Hawthorne. They went to Agassiz. It's a nice neighborhood. I just don't feel that our lives should be interrupted with this transient lodging situation.
Hi, my name is Rich Nelson. I live directly to the north of the property in question. We have a shared driveway, so during the winter, with 5 cars in and out, or whatever the adequate number of parking spaces would be, will cause a problem. Snow piles up there where generally I chip that away and it's usually about 7 or 8 inches of ice. Secondly, again, the parking constraint. As to RDO Offutt, they have a very large parking lot to the east of their building. And before that was a school, it was a college. So that has always been over in that section has always been something different. So boundaries have an impact, and A Street has never had anything like that on there, at least in recent memory. As for the traffic coming down A Street, I think you're very incorrect at the number of cars coming through there. We're out there. I'm sure there has been a traffic study at the number of cars on there, but it's way more than just the neighborhood traffic. As for the conditional use components of private parties, no large, can we get a definitive number on that? And where are they going to park? The bed and breakfast, right in the ordinance, states that those things are not permitted. Now you're asking for a waiver on a waiver. As for residency, I'm not sure that they live there anymore either. As mentioned, they have a few other properties. So.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? We'll close the public.
Could I ask a question? Now, you said you had a shared driveway. Is it shared with the Nelsons? It is. Oh, I don't ever remember seeing your driveway coming in the same entrance. Oh, but there's a fence between your property and theirs.
Okay. Hey, let's see, if you're going to speak, I'd like you to come to the podium, please. recognize who you are.
I'm sorry,
please.
Carol Baum, and I live at 511 8th Street South. Don, did you mention that they're living in a condo right now?
Yes, I said they had 2 other properties, and as of 6 months ago, they were moving into the condo on South 8th Street.
But you don't think they live there right at this moment, do you?
Well, I assume that they are.
In this deal, though, didn't it say that they were going to be living on site and then renting out 5 bedrooms?
Christine Klobeck, speaking on behalf of the Nelsons who couldn't be here today. They currently reside at 611 8th Street South. And the application is based on the premise that if granted this conditional use permit, they would continue to reside there and operate it as such. I can't speculate as to what may happen
With the next owner. I can't begin to address that, as I'm sure you know.
So that, I have another question for you. So they are in the process of selling the property?
That's a process that's been underway for several years.
Okay, so this conditional use permit would be sustained if a new owner, if an individual or family takes ownership of the property and continues to run it as a bed and breakfast?
That is correct. And the Nelsons may, again, I can't speak for them. By seeking a conditional use permit doesn't necessarily mean that they intend to act on it themselves.
Keith?
Can I ask a question of staff or Eric Johnson? When does it become a bed and breakfast issue that we deal with versus Airbnb? For instance, I just pulled it up randomly on my phone and there's over 100 residences in Fargo that offer it through that. Is it when it becomes its own business, or what's the criteria?
Well, the issue of the Airbnb is one of a definition. Here you have somebody who's clearly going to hold themselves out for this purpose, and our zoning law sort of addresses that particular sort of facet of use that isn't quite covered under the Airbnb. Airbnb is, falls under this category of running a hotel basically out of your home, if you will. That's probably a crude way of saying it, but there are some parallels to it. But in this particular case, I think there's just a separate definition that applies to bread and breakfast and the conditional use permit process.
Is it the breakfast? Just
It's the breakfast.
Yeah, and if I can add, Donald's been doing a lot of research on this with our code enforcement task force.
Commissioners, so I've never owned an Airbnb or stayed at one, but the B&B in there is an advertising thing. That they call it Airbnb. I don't know if they all offer beds and breakfasts. The bed and breakfast that is in our ordinance is in our ordinance, and it's also in the North Dakota Century Code. And these bed and breakfasts that we are talking about authorizing here are inspected by the state as part of their Division of Food and Lodging, and you also have to get licensed by the state. That's not anything your commission sees, but Mr. Nelson was advised of that, and I believe he is in or has completed that process and would have had to complete it before he is able to do this. So people who operate Airbnbs have no regulation at this point. Well, that's not exactly true, but they're not regulated by the state like these would be at this time. And we continue to deal with that issue of Airbnb. We have occasional contact with the State Department of Food and Lodging and in our Code Enforcement Task Force, as Ms. Crutchfield mentioned, trying to determine, how to deal with that. Many jurisdictions in this nation are challenged about how to deal with Airbnbs, but people operate them. But that is a separate, despite the similarity of the B&B part, that is a separate thing from what is authorized here, because Airbnbs at this time have no authorization from the city to operate or from the state.
Thanks, that's helpful.
Yes, sir, thank you.
I have a question.
For who?
For these guys over here,
Okay.
the staff. So if we allow this conditional use permit and the Nelsons at some point in the future sell the house, does the conditional use permit transfer with the property, or do they lose that? Does that terminate at that point?
No, the conditional use permit will transfer with the property. If the bed and breakfast ceases to exist, I believe for a year, then the conditional use permit will cease.
And then if we deny, what stops them from just being one of these Airbnbs that doesn't have any, is not regulated, basically?
I don't think there's anything that would stop them at this point in time from becoming an Airbnb.
Okay.
Okay.
Other than it wouldn't be a codified use, and so, for instance, if they're trying to, future buyer, we're trying to do basically it's an illegal business. I don't like to use the word illegal in front of our attorney, but it's basically an illegal business. It's not if a bank is looking for zoning confirmation, that it's not an allowed use. So that's how we answer that question. And so we could cite them for code violations.
Mary.
So basically, what they're doing is turning this house into a business in hopes of turning around and selling it as a business at a higher price than what it would go on the residential market.
I don't know if we know that, ma'am.
We can
That might be
Okay,
their-
but that would be a
speculate to that.
speculative thing, and knowing that it's been on the market for 10 years and hasn't sold, then it's probably at the wrong price, would be my speculation, but.
And we can only, any further comments?
Anyway, all up and down the street, we're all proud, single-family homeowners, all the way up and down the street, and we just hate to have it change. Because to me, too, it's just the beginning of having a motel in your place, in your block, or maybe the next thing is this event center you're talking about, and, we'd like it it'd be wonderful if some nice family would buy it, and their kids would go to Hawthorne, and, that's what we'd like. And that's what happened when the Nelsons bought it. So it's great.
Question for our chairman.
Yes.
Thank you.
Is there any
Thank
way
you.
we would be able to get some pictures of the parking in the front? That's
We
my.
had that, well.
I didn't see it very
parking
clearly.
out front.
Yeah. Okay. So there's just a fence. Okay, thank you. I wasn't.
What are you trying to see, ma'am?
I wanted to clarify the picture with the parking.
Yeah, and on the street, there's just on-street parking, and then a driveway with parking in the back, like a court, if that's correct.
Yeah, when you see the aerial, you can see back there, there's a 5-car garage or 4-car.
Yeah, it looks like a 4-car garage. And then additional parking is shown.
All right. One more question.
Just one other point of interest while I have Airbnb up, there's actually a one listed at 5th Avenue and 8th Street. This is right.
Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing again. Any additional discussion, commissioners? Are we ready to act?
Can I ask a question of engineering? Has there been any traffic studies? Have there been any parking? Or do you want to speak to the parking at all, if there has been anything of note?
As far as, to my knowledge, there's been no parking studies, or typically we won't, our department hasn't done parking studies. We'll look at traffic analysis, but not parking studies.
Thank you.
It's interesting. I've grown up in that neighborhood, and I live in that, south of that neighborhood now. And it's interesting to me that we've always allowed parking on both sides of 8th Street. And I live on 7th Street where we have parking on one side, and yet there's been very little, if any, accidents with children or anything with the sided parking. So it's just an interesting comment that the neighborhood has never come up in arms that they wanted to get rid of some parking. So, I mean, the parking, it's relatively full in that neighborhood. I'm on that street probably up and down that street 3-4 times a day. So, okay, commissioners, are we ready to act?
I'd like
to make a motion to accept the findings and recommendations of staff and hereby move to approve the conditional use permit to allow a bed and breakfast.
Is there a second? Is there a second?
I'll second it. I do have a question.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
One question for staff, if that's okay. The recommendation number 1, what does that really allow? What is receptions, private parties, and similar activities? What does that allow that you couldn't do at a house anyways?
That's how it's expressly stated in the bed and breakfast section of the LDC. I can read it off for you. It states that receptions, private parties, or similar activities shall not be permitted unless expressly approved as part of this conditional use permit. So when I spoke to Mr. Nelson about it, he was thinking maybe it's something that bride and grooms could come and take photos in that area, or have a groom's dinner there, or maybe if someone staying at the bed and breakfast would like to have a few friends over, that they could do that. So that's his intent with that condition.
Okay, hearing no more discussion. Roll call vote.
Fisher?
Aye.
Holtz? Aye. Bachmeyer?
Aye.
McGelkey?
No.
Morgan?
Aye.
Schneider?
Aye.
Schirling?
No.
Gunkelman?
No. Motion carries 5 to 3, I guess. All right, moving on. Item number 8, a hearing on an application requesting a zoning change from SR2 single dwelling residential to neighborhood office on lot 11, block 1.
Good afternoon. Item 8 is located at 1604 52nd Avenue South. It's being called Silly's Edition. They are requesting a zoning change from the SR2 single family dwelling district to the neighborhood office zoning district. The applicant, Ronald Robson, as well as Father William of Holy Resurrection Orthodox Mission Church, are here as well to answer any additional questions. The applicant is requesting a zone change to the neighborhood office to make the site more attractive to potential buyers. The structure on the property was originally a single dwelling unit before being renovated to a church. The current property owner listed the property for sale in October of 2018. Staff did receive several inquiries from neighboring property owners following the mailings in a 300-foot radius. And included in your packet is one formal comment in the form of a letter, which is there for your viewing. The property abuts this substation to the east and is on the highly trafficked 52nd Avenue South and University. Staff finds that all criteria have been met and are recommending approval. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions for Maggie? If you haven't seen this spot out there, it's tucked in right behind the substation, and you can see it from the pictures now on your screen. You have to know it's there. If you see no questions, I invite the applicant to speak if we have any questions for the applicant.
My name is Alan Cook. I live at 5208 17th Street South, just 2 houses away from the property. Tom and Tara Morris live right next door to me in between the properties that we're talking about. And they wrote an excellent letter sent to you guys to protest changing. There's no reason whatsoever to change that residential area to anything commercial. The access off of 52nd is limited and at sometimes nasty. That little dog leg that we have there off of the 17th and 18th property is oftentimes covered with 8 feet of snow during the wintertime, so access is a big problem getting in and out. Parking there is already a problem with just the church, much less anything else that you're going to put in there in a business. And if there's a theme that I've noticed through the entire meeting, is this property or parking issue is a nightmare everywhere you want to go. To put that into a commercial property over a long-term period of time is just insane. There's just no reason for it. I took a quick walk around the community. I have signatures from the residents of that community, and to a person that I talked to, nobody favored having that changed to commercial at all. So we vehemently opposed the commercial change. If you would like, I have a copy of this for you guys to take a look at for the community.
Submit it to the staff, please. Any questions for this gentleman? Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Ron Robson. I'm a member of Holy Resurrection as well as a church treasurer. I want to thank you for your time today. We've had the property for sale since last October. Our realtor estimates that we've had probably 8 to 10 inquiries from the likes of attorneys who would like to have a small office. And this change would make it more attractive for such a purchaser. We would love to sell it to another church. Doesn't come up very often. And we've had a couple inquiries from people for a private residence. I know at least one of them was looking at, it doesn't have a garage, but they were using it for, would like to use it for a repair shop. I understand they can do it if they live on site. It's not a very attractive for residential use because of the proximity of the substation as well as the fact that there's no garage on the building. So, and has an asphalt front yard too. So we believe it would be a good move. So happy to answer any questions.
Questions for the applicant?
I have a question. Now your services, are they like Sundays only, or what kind of
They vary.
activities?
I mean, of course, the primary service is Sunday morning, and as the neighbor attested, parking is definitely a problem because we'll have 30 cars. Oftentimes in the winter, it's difficult to get one car past the parked cars, let alone more than a one-way traffic.
But I mean, so basically it's Sunday service, and I mean,
other
do you
days
have
during
like
the week, but primarily the primary service is on Sundays, Saturday evenings, and other times during the week.
you don't have like, I know for a lot of churches, Wednesday nights kind of like.
That does happen, yes.
Okay, I was just kind of curious. So, but during the week, there really isn't any coming and going too much?
Not very much during the week.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
I have a question. Is there a fence between you and the residents?
Not in the front yard. In fact, that's part of the confusion. The asphalt continues across. There's no division at all. And I know we've had problems with people getting confused coming in the church parking lot thinking that they can drive out through the neighbor's driveway there. The backyard is fenced in.
So do they kind of take a circle then and go through? Is that what happens?
Yeah, and on Sundays we erect barricades, temporary barricades, to prevent that from happening.
And then could I ask staff a question?
Sure.
Just if this zoning was changed, would there be a requirement then to have a fence?
Residential protection standards would apply to the newly zoned property. So they would have, similarly to what we talked about before, vegetation standards that would come into play.
Thank you.
Question?
I also think it might be worth noting that neighborhood office it's not the same as a neighborhood commercial. So according to our development code, retail sales and services would not be permitted in the neighborhood office zoning district.
So just backing up a little bit with that fence, since it's a concrete driveway that's continuous, how would you propose they rip out the concrete, or what would you do to give a buffer between that and the homes?
I'm going to kick that to Nicole.
Yeah, so what we would probably do in this case is if they qualify for a residential protection waiver, sometimes we do use fences as a substitute for vegetation. That would be also, depending on the scale of adjustment, might require an application and notification to abutting property owners. So we do residential protection standard waivers that either reduce that requirement or change that requirement from the shrubbery to a fence instead. And we would just look at it on a case-by-case basis.
And so the neighbors would be able to petition you at that time to make sure there's a barrier, or?
I would probably defer to someone who works in the site plan process more directly, either Megan or Mark, to answer that question.
The neighborhood protection standards would apply if there's an addition on this piece of property. And in this situation, there's adjoining asphalt between two private property owners. Maybe we want to continue this until next month, and we could have an opportunity to work with both property owners to find a solution on that fence issue. In the future, let's say possibly someone buys both properties, or the neighbors want to have the fence again. I'm unsure how that situation would be handled.
John.
It says here that the zoning is currently SR2 single-family dwelling, but obviously it's not being used as such.
Correct.
Was there some kind of an agreement that was made to allow the church to operate there, which was a very different?
I believe code allows for a church to be an SR2.
For churches in residential neighborhoods, but doesn't require the parking.
Can't answer that question.
Okay, but so if it changed, say you did sell it and it's been operating as a church and you do have a lot of traffic, if it was turned into, say, an office for attorneys, you mentioned that attorneys have been interested in it, that would probably be less traffic than what you have now.
Certainly mean less peak traffic.
Yeah. But it couldn't be anything retail. Yes, okay, all right, thanks.
And when a change of use comes through the site plan review process, we do evaluate parking for a change of use.
Okay. Any more, well, I guess we're sort of open into the public comment anyway. Any more public comment? Okay, I'll close the public comment period. Any additional discussion, or are we ready to act? Mary?
Well, I guess just going back to my original question, I would be concerned that there'd be some kind of buffer between the residences and this building, should it be turned into office space. I think that would only be fair to the residents of the neighborhood.
Maybe just to clarify, if one of the staff, whoever it might be, if it does go to neighborhood office, what would the improvements to the property have to be?
Sorry, Chair, could you say that question again? We're strategizing here.
If it went to a neighborhood office, if this passes today, the current owner of the property would have to, or how would this work as far as make the improvements that would fit that category?
So maybe just to start from the beginning real quick, because I think as we answer the question in bits and pieces, we kind of get a little sidetracked. So to begin with, I'm guessing it's a legal non-conforming use that's at the site today. So there's probably things on the site today that are not code compliant. We don't, if there's no changes made to the site, and if the changes made to the site are qualified less intensive, there's no additional improvements to the site that need to be made. So if there's a church there today and it's going to be a law office per se, and we determine that requires actually less parking, then that is probably not going to require some landscape improvement. So then our landscape code and our parking code are met. But we look at that very closely with the owner and the applicant, looking at the square footage and all sorts of other calculations. We haven't prepared any of those calculations for today, so we wouldn't know. We're kind of just talking in hypothetical. There's nothing, if a change of use comes in permit, that's when we go through again the standards. If it was going to say to change from a occupation, this is where the building code and the land use code kind of meet up. If there's a occupation change, say it's again a gathering space changing to a retail space that's going to have public customers, then we look at that as it relates to change of use. So it gets very detailed pretty quickly as we look at it on a case-by-case basis. If there's concerns you have in the zoning, again, we look at highest and best use, what's allowed in neighborhood office. The intention in neighborhood office as a zoning district is, I would say, exactly like this. It's the idea that a law office could move into a house, or that you could have, like what you see on Fifth Street, Fifth Avenue and University, it kind of blends together. And that's really the intention of neighborhood office. And so I think that's really what I would suggest. You look at those criteria. If you think if that criteria have been met, if you don't think it's been met, then I think you make your vote accordingly based on the testimony. And if you're not ready to act, you can certainly continue this item and want to think about it.
Okay, Commissioner Zoe.
I have a
Mike?
question. So they're using it as a church right now. It meets the uses allowed for SR2.
Correct. A church is allowed by right anywhere.
Okay. The only, I'm kind of reading through this, is, so basically what we're allowing is multi-dwelling structures and offices is what the difference is between SR2 and NO. Correct?
No, so right now, you're just looking at a church. So really you're looking at what's allowed in SR2. Yeah, so you're comparing those two use districts. Is that what you're doing?
Yes.
Protecting the existing and proposed?
What I'm just wondering about is if we vote yes to allow neighborhood office, what are the uses that can go in there? That can't go in, that can go in there right now?
Nothing can go in there by right now, other than the church and single-family housing. Otherwise, a change of use permit would need to be required. At that change of use permit, we would look at that at a staff level and determine if parking increases or if landscape increases, and that takes it at the administration level.
But if you look at existing, it says uses allowed. SR2 allows detached houses, limited daycare centers, parks and open areas, religious institutions, safety services, schools, and basic utilities, and limited telecommunication facilities.
Correct. So any of those uses that were to come in today for the church at the existing site, they would apply for a permit downstairs in the inspections office, and that inspections office would kick it to our office, and we would analyze it for landscape standards and parking standards.
Okay.
And then we would determine if residential protection standards would kick in, or if parking improvements would kick in, or if landscaping would kick in. Otherwise, you would never see that, the public would never see that unless they need a waiver on the residential protection standards.
But if we approve this, are they going to reevaluate the parking?
Not necessarily, only if the use changes.
Okay, all right, that's all I needed to know.
Okay, are we ready to act, or do
I'll
we
make a
want to
motion.
continue?
I'll make a motion.
Okay,
I'd like to make the motion as suggested in the packet by staff.
Is there a second?
I second.
It's been moved and second. Any further discussion? Roll call vote.
McGelkey,
No.
Schneider?
No.
Sherling?
No.
Morgan?
Yes.
Holtz?
Aye.
Fisher?
Aye.
Bachmeyer?
Aye.
Gunkelman?
Aye. Motion carries. All right, let's take a 5-minute break. I flunked my duties as chair and didn't take a break at 4 o'clock. We'll come back for a couple of the last items.
Come on, let's go. I thought you said this was gonna be fast.
Get Rocky back in the saddle.
In my backseat, and I didn't even think
Goofing off. Oh, we're missing something.
we were giving him so much grief. It's so funny.
We're losing our audience.
Oh my goodness.
All right, moving on to item 9, leave the best for last. Hearing on an application and requesting a plot of St. Paul's Newman Center addition. Donald, you're up.
Right. If you go the right direction there. Good afternoon again, Commissioners. Commissioners, you'll see that there are 2 St. Paul's Newman Center items right in a row. There's this item 9, which is a hearing item, and then there's item E1, which is a non-hearing item. These apply to the same project. They just happen to end up on the same agenda, 1, 2 after the other. So you're actually doing 2 different things with them. The first item here is the St. Paul Newman Center minor plat. Little history refresher here. Your Commission saw the St. Paul's Newman Center project at the September 2018 and the December 2018 Planning Commissions, and then it went forward to the City Commission January 14th and February 22nd, or February 11th rather. At the February 11th City Commission, the Commission approved the zone change and the PUD, the Planned Unit Development Master Plan, and that is done now. That part's done. And then there was a modification to the plat. Originally, the plat your commission approved had 3 lots in it. This is depicted in your staff report. And the final version of the St. Paul Newman Center project had 4 lots. And the applicant was advised at the time at the February City Commission meeting that he needed to revise his plat and bring it back through the Planning Commission and City Commission because it's different from what you approved. They just rearranged the area. It's the same size, but a different layout. And so it took some months for that to all come to pass here. But so this is following up on the direction of the City Commission from the February 11th meeting. So what you see here, again, we know the location here at St. Paul Newman Center on 12th Avenue North there and University Drive. 12th Street and 11th Street. Here, of course, is NDSU. If you've been by there recently, you see that demolition has begun here. This is what used to be St. Paul Newman Center here. You're staying on 12th Street, looking west there. There's the convenience store. And then here, you're standing on the south corner of 12th Avenue and University, or the corner of 12th Avenue University, looking south here. And again, you see that the Newman Center is gone. I believe there are some houses that have been demolished there as well. So that's the location. This plat is just showing that what is now Lot 3 and 4, when you saw the plat, was one lot, Lot 3, a little farther down to the side here. And again, that's shown in the 3 comparative plats in your staff report. And now they've just revised it to be 2 lots. Again, these are both for townhomes. And again, Lot 2 would be the market rate housing, and Lot 1 would be the new St. Paul Newman Center, including the parish hall. And so this is just, again, following up on this. The PUD part is done, except for the next part you're going to do. But the PUD is all approved. You're just confirming that this plat, just recommending the approval for the plat here, as indicated in the staff report and shown on the screen. So that Larry Nygaard from from Roy's Development is here, may wish to address the commission, and then that concludes staff's presentation, commissioners. Thank you.
Any questions for Donald before we go to Larry? Okay, Larry, it's all yours.
Chairman Gunkelman, members of the commission, you've heard a lot about this project over the years. The changes that we're talking about today were the result of negotiations we had with the neighborhood subsequent to our planning meetings and discussions. And it modified our design slightly, but we're happy to have accommodated the neighborhood and made the changes, and we look forward to your approval today.
Any questions for Mr. Nygaard? I'll open the public comment. Questions from the public? See no questions, I'll close the public comment. Any additional discussion, Commissioners?
I'm going to recuse myself on this item.
Okay,
Okay.
are we ready to act? We have a motion. Mary,
Move to recommend approval.
is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? See none. Roll call vote, please.
Morgan,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Schirling,
Yes.
Fisher,
Aye.
Bachmeyer,
Aye.
Schneider,
Aye.
Gunkelman.
Aye, motion carries. Moving on to other items. Donald.
So, Commissioners, the next two items are PUD final plans, and after talking to Commissioners Gunkelman and Schneider last week in our agenda preview meeting, they wanted me to just give a brief refresher on how these work. The first one is the St. Paul Newman Center addition we just talked about. In February, as I said, the Commission approved a PUD master plan, which is what is before you on your screen here. This is the general layout of the project. The final step in the PUD is the PUD final plan, which ties also into the building permit review process. Your commission is not approving a building permit or granting a building permit or really reviewing a building permit, but one of the pages from the applicant's rather large submittal of site plans and building permits is this site plan, which we have you evaluate for consistency with the master plan. So when I didn't prepare a side-by-side slide here, but again, as we just talked about, here's the Newman Center and student housing, the market rate housing, the townhomes, and then the lot for future townhomes. You see the accesses here on the back. And again, similar layout here. This is where the market rate is, St. Paul Newman Center and housing, faith-based housing, townhomes. You don't see it too well with all the lines in there, but there's lot 4 for future townhomes. Again, the access is here. And so that's, as staff has reviewed this, we have found the two projects match. So we don't go through absolutely every point and every inch of the PUD. That's not part of the process we do here. That these match. The applicant has submitted all their building plans for the church part, and they will shortly be submitting the market rate. Or Mr. Nygaard, those are coming right in the next couple days. And so city staff, including the planning department, inspections department, fire and engineering, have been reviewing those, but they can't really go any farther on that until this step is completed. So again, just matching up the two drawings here basically, and we'll have one for this, and then we'll have a similar one for Diamond Willow in the next agenda item. So that concludes staff's presentation on that. Thank you, Commissioners. We have a recommendation there for you too.
Okay. So is this a roll call vote or just a voice vote?
They're all roll calls, sir.
Pardon me?
I believe they're all roll calls, sir.
Okay.
Never go wrong with a roll call.
I'd like to ask Donald a question.
Sure.
Yes, ma'am.
With the development as it's proceeded, there had been discussion with the Roosevelt neighborhood about removing and moving some of the houses that were on the site.
Yes, ma'am.
What's your knowledge of how that's progressing?
Very limited. If I may ask my colleague a question. Aaron, is that included in what you're presenting? Nope. Okay. My knowledge of that is very limited then, ma'am, and it's not in the
And I can add to that, Donald.
Okay.
So basically, the city right now is seeking interest in available vacant lots, so we could move the houses to that. But we also need to make a kind of presentation or decision point. We're trying to figure out where that process goes, probably to the city commission on the cost related to moving a house and getting it established. So we have financials related to that to show about probably a 200,000 plus cost that it would take to move the house, get it established, put it on a site, because we would have to buy the site as well. And so looking at that feasibility, and if that feasibility can meet with the developer's timeline. So I would say Commissioner Strand, Commissioner Grinberg, Jim Gilmore, the mayor, and myself and Mark have been communicating about that and with the neighborhood.
In addition to that, there's been 2 houses identified by our building inspections department that's worth moving. One of them, the Dias, wants to move down to South Fargo, so that leaves 1 house for us to research and see how feasible it is.
So there aren't so many houses, just 1. Okay, good.
Mr. Gunkelman, if I may just add one more item, that concludes planning's presentation. Actually, Mr. Ludall, our city forester, has some comments as well on the tree situation related to this.
On the Newman project.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Chair, I just have a question back for Donald. What am I missing here? Because when I look at this, the 2 maps don't really match up.
How do you mean, ma'am?
Well, I mean, and so I'm probably not seeing it right, but the townhomes, everything seems to be shifted more to the south,
right.
The way I'm looking at it. And am I missing something?
South. Do you mean these
yeah, so.
These townhomes go
and then
that
when
way?
you,
Oh, I see, yeah.
When you look at the next page, you see how everything seems like it's shifted to the south, and I don't see where there's extra room to put in those 7 units.
Well, so these are the 7 here.
Right.
These 7 here are these here.
Okay.
Yeah. And so here's the difference. And Mr. Nygaard, I might have you help me out here. It is a slightly, what you're seeing, ma'am, and I asked the same question, yeah, it's a slightly different configuration. Here you see 3 and 4. So there's like a triple townhome here and a 4 unit here. When you look at this, it's a 5 and a 2. So there's 5 narrower ones and 2 larger ones. Is that right, Mr. Nygaard?
Yes, that's right. Based on some of the calls we were receiving from potential buyers, those, by the way, are for sale townhomes. And some of the interest that we were getting from calls indicated a little different design than the 3-story kind of a brownstone that we had envisioned originally. And so we did alter the floor plan of those first 2 units a little bit from what we first showed the Planning Commission. So we ended up with 2 2-story plans and then 5 3-level splits like you see right now versus all 3-level splits. But the counts and the approximate locations are very close to what we originally planned.
So I'm just curious, they're 2 stories with a tuck-under garage? They ramblers?
The 3 stories would be a tuck-under garage. The 2 stories would be more like a conventional 2-story home where you just drive up and be on grade.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yes, ma'am, thanks for that. And like I said, I know the point you're trying to make there. And included in your staff report are the 7 findings we need to make. And so there's a little modification of things like that that's in there, as long as you see, the density didn't increase and some other things didn't change, which they have not in this project. Thank you, Mr. Nygaard.
Scott, you're up.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, thank you very much. I just wanted to briefly share some of my comments and thoughts on the existing public street trees. Currently, there's 32 that surround the property. 17 of these are either large American elm or common hackberry, all mature. The remainder trees are smaller ornamental ones. Currently, there's a draft developer's agreement out there that includes those 17 mature trees with an appraised value associated with them that would be some kind of compensation, financial compensation to the city if they were to be removed. Right now, I think there are plans to preserve some of them, but I just wanted to note that there is potential that there could be removals of those mature trees along with this project. And I'd just be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Scott, whenever there's a removal, you're brought into the picture. If I Isn't that right?
Should be, yes. And normally, yes.
Okay. Any questions for Scott?
Thank you.
Just
Mary?
one quick one.
Yep, Mary.
So then are they replaced with an additional tree somewhere else on this property, or?
There's not a requirement for that. They will have to follow land development code requirements with any replacements that do occur.
Thank you.
Question for Scott. Has there been any repercussions among residents as to potential removal of the trees?
There have been cases in the past that tree removal does cause some emotions to surface, and my point here is just to make it known that potentially this could happen with some of the mature trees, and just so folks know and have an understanding that once the chainsaws do start to fire up, if and when that happens, that there has been some kind of notification provided, just to let folks know.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, Commissioners, we need a motion on item number 1, the Plan Unit Development Final Plan for the Newman Center.
I'm going to recuse myself again.
Right, again.
Yep.
I hear a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call vote.
Fisher,
Aye.
Morgan,
Aye.
Holtz,
Aye.
Schneider,
Aye.
Bachmeyer,
Aye.
Schirling,
Yes.
Kunkelman,
Yes. Mary's got me saying yes now. Motion carries. Okay, moving on to item number 2, Planned Unit Development Final Plan for Diamond Willow Addition.
Yes, sir. Again, similar thing with the planned unit development final plan. The master plan for the Diamond Willow area, which is moved from the NDSU area more toward the downtown area. Here's 10th Avenue South and 10th Avenue North rather, 7th Street North. Sanford Downtown Hospital is right over here. This PUD and plat was approved back in March of 2018, I believe the March 26th City Commission meeting. So your commission saw it a couple times in late 2017 and early 2018. Some of you commissioners may not even been here at that time. But this was to create, there were 2 houses there that were actually subject to condemnation by the city that the property owner owned and the developer owned, Vanderson Properties. And so eventually they took those down, and they have proposed 6 townhomes here, 6 independent townhomes. This is the location. This is the old photo here with the new plat laid over it. So these are the old 2 houses. They're gone. Even though the PUD final plan and the building plans have not been approved, they are allowed to do site work. So this was the demo. This was this morning. So we're looking, this is 7th Street here, just looking at Easterly. So there's where the houses aren't anymore, and they can do the site prep work on that. And again, matching up the 2 plans here, this was the fairly simple plan here from November 2nd, 2017, which made it all the way through the commission approval process, showing these are townhouses with garages in the front here on all the way around. And then this is the one from currently, again, same layout there, pretty much with the garages and the driveways and the space behind them. So this is an attempt to get a higher density product. We've worked with Nate Anderson, who is the developer and the owner on this with his partner in Vanderson Properties. Worked with him to develop this a little different situation in that neighborhood. I know there are some duplexes and some houses have been converted to having more than 1 unit, as well as some apartments. This is something a little different in that neighborhood that Mr. Anderson is given a try here. So again, same situation. Their building plans are under review, but they also need to have this approval of this plan. And Stacy Holmes, representing Nathan Anderson, is with us this afternoon, and they wish to address, or this evening now, I guess, wish to address the commission. And again, you're just approving the match between these plans. You're not approving a building permit or granting a building permit. That concludes staff's presentation. Thank you, Commissioners.
Any other questions for Donald?
I have a question for Donald.
Yes, ma'am.
With these PUDs, isn't it normally the case that they need to be on fairly high-traffic streets, arterial?
Yeah, generally they are. That was included in the PUD for this, that it is a lower traffic street. You are correct, that's in the ordinance. But that was part of the approval of this PUD, that we're trying it on a lower intensity street there.
Okay, so that's, that was overlooked in kind of a test case then? Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, it's if you go back to the earlier staff reports, it's mentioned in there. I didn't bring it back up in this one, but
okay.
we did note that point, ma'am.
Maggie?
I remember back on our hearings on this, the neighborhood had some density concerns, but I guess as a neighbor to this property myself, I wanted to point out that this is MR3 right now, and that whole sort of section on 10th Avenue is MR3.
Yes, sir, as you see.
I personally don't necessarily think that's the appropriate zoning, so I'm happy with this sort of creative approach. I mean, 6 townhomes versus a big apartment building on there seems a lot more desirable for the surrounding uses in that area. So I don't know. I like this for potentially for what it could have been. I think
yes,
it's
sir.
a good product.
Further questions? Any questions for the applicant? See none. There is no public comments, so. Okay, Commissioners, any further discussion? If not, do I have an emotion? Do I have a motion, please?
A motion?
A motion. Mike?
I'll offer the motion as included in the staff report.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call vote.
Bachmeyer,
Aye.
Holtz. Aye. Morgan,
Aye.
McGilkey,
Aye.
Fisher,
Aye.
Schneider,
Aye.
Schirling,
Yes.
Kunkelman.
Aye. Motion carries. Item number 3, amendments to the 2019 annual action plan. Oh, sorry.
I haven't seen it come up yet.
Were you here in the beginning of the hearing, sir? Or did you
I came at right at 3 o'clock.
Okay, that was when they announced the item was continued, item 4A, B, and C. That is continued till September. They announced that. I believe, Commissioner, you announced that, didn't you?
I did, that
Yes,
it was not moved to September.
Yeah, so that one is actually not at this hearing today. It's on September 3rd, I think is the next meeting.
Okay, am I going to get another letter notifying me about that?
No, but I can talk to you in a minute here.
Well, I have concrete ordered. I'm supposed to be there right now. I'm a contractor. I sat through the whole meeting.
Okay.
And so what? It's September
3rd.
At 3 o'clock again?
Yes, sir.
And if the commission does choose, if you want to listen to his comments, you're welcome to. We can catch that on tape.
We certainly could right now if you want to.
I really don't have time. Sorry.
Okay. At the neighborhood meeting last week.
Yep, I missed that.
Yep. There were some comments from the surrounding neighbors. There were a couple of us at that. But the September 3rd meeting, if you can make that.
Yep. Yeah, I wrote a letter, and I'll make sure to come. My main concern is privacy with the 3-story thing. So, but
Okay.
thank you for your time.
Okay.
No, sorry for the
There are no
confusion tonight.
There are no slides to this, so this is just a placeholder.
Okay. You're doing number 3?
I'm doing number 3.
Okay, you're up.
So this item really, I think we came to you a few months back, and so you'll see these periodically as we get our 2019 and 2020 community development block grant action plans kind of in line with project activities as they begin to happen. And anytime we have a substantive change to our action plan and it requires us to go through the citizen participation plan. That's the official title of it. And that citizen participation plan has 3 stops, one at Planning Commission, one at Community Development Committee, and one at City Commission. And this is the first of 3 stops along the way. And what we're proposing to do in 2019 as part of our activities is slightly amend the Affordable Housing and Development Project category. That was a category that, if you in your packet on the second page, it itemizes this in a little bit more detail on the notice of public hearing. And basically, what this did is allow us to indicate the 1529 10th Avenue South property, and then also revise an activity to reduce the cost from $284,000 to $103,000. And so anytime there's a substantive change, and substantive is defined as more than $50,000, and as well as the location, and so that's why this is in front of you today, is that we're making a financial change, and there is a public process. So there's an ad that goes in the paper, it gets posted on our website, and then the public hearing is actually at the city commission level. So that just a little bit on that process. So I know this is a little bit unique. We don't come in front of you very often with our community development block grant activities. The second change is it all connects, item, I would say on the public notice, if you're looking at 1B and 2A and 2C, all of these relate to the same project, and actually 3A. And so in summary, we are in partnership with Beyond Shelter to help them with acquisition and construction on Home Field 3. That's the third of 3-phase projects on senior housing development. And so to do that, we have to go through these steps. And so that activity gets classified, it gets a little confusing, but that activity gets classified as the affordable housing development activity, as well as acquisition activity, as well as our community development housing organization, which is called a CHODO for short. And Beyond Shelter is the only one really allocated in the North Dakota state. So there's a lot of detail for that. And I'd be glad to do like a brown bag presentation a little bit more on how community development block grant processes work. But in front of you today is basically the request to proceed on with the 1529 and activity, as well as the Beyond Shelter activity. And we do need a vote to do that, and I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Questions? Mary?
I move to approve the proposed amendments.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call vote.
Morgan.
Aye.
McGelkey.
Aye.
Bachmeyer.
Aye.
Fisher.
Aye.
Schurling.
Yes.
Snyder.
Aye.
Holtz.
Aye.
Kunkelman.
Aye. Motion carries. Roars Newman Block, Roosevelt Neighborhood Renewal Plan. Aaron?
Yeah. So item E4 is review of renewal plan for TIF District 2019-02. It's probably been a while since the Planning Commission has seen one of these, so I'll try and provide a quick overview here. Unfortunately, Jim Gilmore was not able to be here tonight. He's typically the one that would be presenting these, at least he has in the past. So in a quick summary, the City Commission has directed staff to prepare a renewal plan for a proposed TIF district at the St. Paul Newman Center block. As you recall, there has been 2 previous items on this site here today, but it's the 1100 block of the east side of University Drive North in Fargo. And this renewal plan is scheduled for a public hearing and consideration for approval at the August 26th City Commission meeting. However, prior to that, City Commission is directed by essentially the North Dakota Century Code to submit the renewal plan to the Planning Commission for review and recommendation as to its conformity with the comprehensive plan. And so this item is on your agenda here tonight in order for you guys to get a chance to take a look at it and basically confirm that the proposed redevelopment project is consistent with the GO 2030 comprehensive plan. As this item has been before this commission fairly recently, as you recall, there is a number of reasons that the proposed development does comply or is consistent with the GO 2030 plan, which are outlined on the bottom of page 2 within the renewal plan in your packet, maybe subsection 1.3E. And so, with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Again, the question before you tonight is whether or not the proposed redevelopment complies with the GO 2030 comp plan.
Okay.
Thanks, Aaron. I appreciate this. I thought one of the interesting things in here is the money that would go back to neighborhood projects in the Roosevelt neighborhood. I thought that was a creative solution that maybe is something we can test out and try to repeat elsewhere. I just think that's a neat cooperation between the developer and neighborhood and what the city can do to help things out and solve our problems before they come to us.
Maybe, I don't know if the other commissioners, Aaron, you want to elaborate on what
Yeah, that's
Rocky
good.
just said? We met with you last week and you explained it about part of this.
Yeah, I apologize. I should have talked through this in a little more detail. So this is a little bit unique. It's a little bit different than maybe ones you guys have previously seen. There's two maps in front of you today. These are attachments within the renewal plan. The map on the left outlines the boundaries of the actual TIF district. This is the boundary where the tax revenues would be coming in from. And then the map on the right is the renewal area, and this is the boundary within where a portion of that tax revenue can be spent within the neighborhood. And so outlined within that renewal plan is kind of a breakdown of the costs associated with the redevelopment. And within that, you'll see that there is $200,000 to $300,000 that would be going towards neighborhood house site acquisition. And the idea is that roughly a quarter of the funds from the TIF district could be used for projects yet to be identified in the future throughout the neighborhood within the boundary of the renewal area.
That clarified it for everybody, but it's kind of like Rocky said, it's kind of I think a great step for the neighborhood, kicking some money back into the neighborhood for some housing projects of sorts or whatever. Any other comments, or I'll entertain a motion to accept this renewal plan.
I'll make the motion as outlined by staff.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
I'm going to recuse myself again.
Okay.
Thank you.
Roll call vote, please.
Morgan?
Aye.
Schneider?
Aye.
So Holtz? Aye. Fisher?
Aye.
Schirling?
Yes.
Bachmeyer?
Aye.
Kunkelman?
Aye. Motion carries. And Donald attached a memorandum about the North Dakota Planning Association annual conference. It's out in Bismarck this year. A few years ago, I attended it. 3 or 4 of the sessions when it was in Fargo, and it was real interesting. But I think it's just to let you know the dates. And if you pulled up the website, you could see some of the sessions. If it worked for anybody that wanted to attend, Donald would work with you on that, so.
Yes, sir.
Seeing no other comments, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Oh, I thought we were gonna die for a second.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's moving and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carries. We're adjourned.